able to hear? Yeah, sure. I'm just could you please, because we can't hear from the international participant. Dr. Aditi Mukherjee or Professor Stefan Ullenbrook, anyone who could confirm? Dr. David Potter?
Hear us.
All right, okay, good. Thanks, Aditi. Okay, so we are starting this first session on the thematic area 1, which is sustainable and climate resilient solutions thinking ahead. And then the thematic session 1 is the impact of climate change on water and food security in the Indus Basin. I think that when we talk about the Indus Basin, everyone knows that the climate change is one of the key factors there that will be impacting on the Indus Basin in terms of water security. Many studies have highlighted that it's the fifth most climate vulnerable country on earth. Extreme climate variability has highlighted the urgency to introduce climate resilient solutions for improved water governance at all levels, whether starting from the federal to the provincial and local scale level. Indus Basin faces many unique challenges: population growth, urbanization, groundwater exploitation, industrial effluent, and unsustainable groundwater practices. On the top of that one, the climate change, which is one of the major phenomena there. If we talk about the per capita water availability has declined less than 1,000 cubic meter, and Pakistan, but on the other hand side, when we are looking on the ground, more than 90% of water is used for agriculture. There is that much water will not be available in the future. So we need to think about how we could reduce the water footprint from the irrigated agriculture so that we could meet the needs of the growing cities, population, and everything. Recently, the IPCC panel report again highlighted that's released in 2021 in September. It's highlighted that when the climate change, especially in South Asia, will be more. Glaciers are declining, and then there is the seasonal snow duration, glacial mass, and then they will decline further by the mid-20th century. And the runoff on that one will increase up to the mid of the 21st century, and then it will be runoff may decrease due to loss of the glacier storage. The other we have observed it, the annual and summer monsoon precipitation is pattern are changing. That's talking about the more interannual variability. Considering the water storage capacity, which we have at 30 days of water storage capacity, and again, that's also thinking about that one, we need to think about the other alternative options, how we could deal with the climate shocks. And that's where we need to look around that one. What are the innovative solutions? What are the happening around the global best practices around the globe? And that's what we'll be hearing today from our keynote speaker. Just want to emphasize on last thing is the climate change. If you're looking around the extreme variability, even the flood event of 2011 to 2014 has caused economic loss of 18 billion US dollars and destroyed standing crops covering approximately 4.3 million hectares and affected around 38 million people. As part of an ongoing modeling study by the CGIAR Water, Land and System across 30 of the world's largest river basin, it is predicted by 2040, Indus will have the most pronounced water security index and the extreme. With this one, I will be now requesting to Dr. Aditi Mukherjee to talk about that one, the major findings from the IPCC, the working group report and its implications for high mountain Asia. Thank you. Before Aditi will say, just let me give a quick introduction. She is the experienced lead with the demonstrated history of working with the international organization like ICMOD. Now she is leading the research group of IWMI on the climate change. And she is a part of the writer and contributor for the IPCC, the upcoming report, which is doing it. And she is very passionate about the climate change and how that could make an impact and what are the best practices, how to deal with those. And over to you, Aditi. Yes, Aditi, please go ahead.
I am not able to share my screen. It says host disable participant screen sharing. Can the screen sharing be enabled for me to share my presentation?
Okay. Kashif, could you please do that one? Give her a right for the co-host and then enabling for the screen sharing.
Yes. Thank you so much. Can you see my screen? First of all, thank you and congratulations to Mohsin and our colleagues from IMI Pakistan for organizing this fantastic workshop. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to present in this August company. What I'm going to talk about today is the insight from the latest IPCC report that was released in August. And I will also, because we are focusing on Indus, I would also like to highlight some of the work that ECMOD had done as a part of the Hindu Kush Himalayan Regional Assessment, and I was one of the co-editors for that report. And I would use both of these to focus on Asia in general and Indus in particular. So I think many of you, and I'll be happy to put the link to the summary for policymakers of the IPCC Working Group 1. If you have gone through the report, it made, most news media captured the report. I think this is one of those really easy to read report that has said in very certain language, very strong language, that there is absolutely no doubt that human influence has warmed climate at a rate that is unprecedented in the last 2000 years. So what we are really seeing is that climate change has happened, and it has happened due to human induced emissions, mostly carbon and other greenhouse gas emissions. So I think this IPCC is using languages like unequivocal. It's no longer, certain, highly certain, but is actually much stronger language like unequivocal. Another thing, I'm not very sure if all of us, of course, this audience is very much aware of it, but I often wonder if the people out there are actually aware that very often it seems as if climate change is a thing of the future. Climate will change. But the reality is climate has already changed, and we are living in a 1.1 degree world. It means that our average global surface come ocean temperatures, that's an average of surface and ocean temperatures, are now 1.1 degree higher than it was in the pre-industrial time. And this is actually a lot of change, and we are already seeing the impacts. So the important point too is that we are already living in a world that has changed, and this is changed because of this change has been entirely driven by greenhouse gas emissions, roughly a third of which has been actually masked by cooling from aerosol emissions. And South Asia is one of the largest aerosol emitters. So this is where we have a lot of air pollution, a lot of short-lived climate forces. But overall, the takeaway from this slide is that already 1.1 degree warming has happened, and greenhouse gas emission has been the main reason. Now I wanted to briefly walk us through what does it mean, and all these maps and figures are publicly available and are a part of the IPCC's summary for policymakers. The first of them is that hot extremes are increasing in almost all the regions. So this is a stylized map of the world, and you can see SAS is the South Asia region. And here you can see that of these some 45 regions, in 41 region, actually the data shows that since 1950 have increased, and those are statistically significant also. So in South Asia, for instance, there is a very high confidence in human contribution to this observed change. There are a couple of things. Hot extremes have increased. Those have increased due to climate change, and that climate change is anthropogenic. There is similar finding on what has happened to heavy precipitation since 1950s. Here, data is a bit more patchy because we all know that precipitation depends on a number of other things, and is capturing its global warming fingerprint is not as straightforward as temperature. Nonetheless, again, South Asia, if you can see, we do have a low agreement due to limited agreement, but overall it seems like in South Asia, actually there has been an increase in observed heavy precipitation. So both hot extremes and precipitation extremes have gone up. This brings us to the third thing that all of us care a lot about, and that's about changes in droughts. Again, here data is patchy in many parts, which also calls for research organizations to actually do more research, and the hydromet organizations to put in more monitoring stations for continuous data monitoring. For the South Asia region, there is a low agreement in the type of change, but I mean, having said that, all of us living in this region have experienced droughts. What we do not know if those incidents of droughts have increased and whether those droughts are also caused due to human-induced climate change. Now coming to the future, what the models are quite clear about, and all those are using CMET6 models. That's the latest round of ensemble models that have been used in this assessment. What is showing that when it comes to annual mean precipitation for every degree of global warming, like when we go 1.5 degree, right now we are in a 1.1 degree. When we go to a 1.5 to 2 to 4 degrees, you can see the darker it becomes means annual mean precipitation actually increases, and South Asia is quite a hot spot. Similar is the thing for annual mean soil moisture change. So that also increases with every degree of global warming. There are more very interesting findings. I think I would recommend, if you have the opportunity, please have a look. It's very easy, written in very easy language. Now, there was another report of IPCC that came out at the end of 2018, and that was also quite path-breaking because this report for the first time was actually looking at this target of 1.5 that the Paris had set. The Paris has said 1.5, between 1.5 to 2, not exceeding 2. So IPCC was commissioned with the task of looking at what does it mean to reach 1.5 degree. And it came up very clearly with saying that to limit warming up to 1.5 degree, remember we are already at 1.1, CO2 emissions need to fall by 45% by 2030. Actually, we should have already bent our emission curves. Now, every delay we do in reducing greenhouse gas emission, the sharper emission it needs to be, which means even deeper cuts. Basically, the more we wait, the harder it becomes to limit ourselves within 1.5 degree. So with all of those, we have heard in the COP a lot of use of the term net zero. Basically, if we want to limit warming to 1.5 degrees, CO2 emissions would need to reach net zero by 2050. And this would require deep emission cuts in all sectors, deep behavioral changes, etc. And it is important for Asia, as much of the emissions since the early part of the century has been contributed by Asian countries. So while Asia, China, and India, for example, are not responsible for the current climate change, this is mostly the responsibility of the global north, which have been emitting and through the process improving the standard of living. The reality is that from the beginning of this century, the emissions have gone up from Asia as well. So there are also changes that requires to be made here. Now, very briefly, I want to come 1.5 degrees, something we are increasingly thinking that perhaps we won't reach there, given that the emission cuts are not as rapid as they need to be. But even 1.5 degree is not good enough for our Hindu Kush Himalayan region. And this is an assessment that ECMOD had done, a similar process to IPCC. It was a group of over 300 scientists from the region who had done this Hindu Kush Himalayan assessment. So what it says is that even 1.5 degrees is too hot for the Himalayas because of something called elevation dependent warming. So 1.5 degree global warming would actually mean 2.1 degree in the higher elevations of the Himalayas. And the projections are showing that in a 1.5 degree world, we are thinking glaciers in the HKH will lose 36% of volume. That glaciers would lose 1/3 of the glacier volume by 2100. And if we are unable to limit to 1.5 degrees, which seems we won't be, then we are thinking of actually loss of 50% of ice and volume. And this is tremendously important from Indus because the source of Indus is obviously glaciers, but also Indus has, compared to Ganges and Brahmaputra, much higher snow, ice, and glacier dependency, because Ganges and Brahmaputra, being further towards the east, they actually get a lot of their runoff generated from monsoons, while Indus it's much more snow and ice dependent. Again, all of you already know that. So this is another one of my favorite graphs. We used to use it a lot at EC Mode, where I used to work before, actually. So this is a expedition in 1921 by Wheeler Royal Geographical Society, and that's the Mount Everest. This is a glacier. Keep your eyes at any one point of the photo. And now if you see, this is exactly the same location, and this is what it is in 2009. So I'll just do it one more time. So this was 1921, and what we are now seeing is a glacial lake. This is a glacial lake has formed here, and we are aware that while glacial lake incidents have gone up, there are many more glacial lakes, and glacial lake outburst flood is a major threat also in the upper Indus. Then I think what's important not to forget is the equity aspect. So this was some photos we had taken while working in Ladakh, which shares a very similar topography with that of the Karakoram upper Indus. So here we were working in this village. This is a very nice irrigation system, but obviously it's in stress, and all those glaciers far away are the only source of water for these villages. And the village elders were asking us, what can we do to preserve our irrigation system? And the answer is that they can do really little, because the glaciers aren't melting because they have emitted. The glaciers are melting because somebody else far away have emitted, and all of us are fearing the consequences. So in climate change debate, we have to remember that those who are most vulnerable and have not contributed to climate emissions and global warming are the ones that are facing the most severe impacts. And communities in upper Indus would be one among them. Again, these are some work by researchers who have looked at it in more detail, and what it shows is that Indus, compared to what I was saying, Brahmaputra and Ganges, all the red parts of the upper Indus shows that this is where there is the highest level of dependence on glacier melt. So Indus is really vulnerable because of climate change. I will just skip that. So I'll just stop here. Is very often, and this was also a slide I had made for a bunch of college students from the US, where I had a talk a couple of weeks ago, and the question on everybody's mind is, what can we do? I mean, obviously answer is, the science is very clear that we have to mitigate right away. We should have started mitigation. If we had started mitigation 20 years ago by reducing CO2 emissions, our path would have been much easier. But given what it is, we have to mitigate, and mitigate very fast, decarbonize all sectors. But as water professionals, we also need to be a part of that mitigation discussion, because a lot of the mitigation pathways will have water impacts. Think of forestation, for example, or forestation. If forests are put in the wrong place, that can actually exacerbate local water crisis, or many other mitigation measures may have, like biofuel, for example, again would have a high water impact. Adapt as much as you can, but in some spaces, and high mountains are actually one of those spaces, there are limits to adaptation. How do you adapt when your lives are based off glacier melt irrigation water and that glacier is gone? I mean, of course, Karakoram has a different problem. Karakoram has a bit of a Karakoram anomaly, but that's really an anomaly. Almost everywhere else, glaciers are melting. So it's important to know that your adaptation space also becomes constrained beyond 1.5 to 2 degrees. So even how much do you want to adapt, but the limits to adaptation will be met very soon unless we are able to mitigate, and mitigate in a water sensitive way. And finally, leave no one behind, just transition. How do we mitigate and adapt, keeping climate justice in mind? And some of the work that IMI does more concretely, say in promotion of solar irrigation farms, we are actually trying to answer these questions of just transitions. I believe there is a session on that also later on. So with that, thank you, and over to you, Mohsin. So this is what the 1.5-degree world report said. Every bit of warming matters, every year matters, every choice that we make matters. And this is some of my favorite quotes. Thank you, and over to you, Mohsin. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Aditi, for sharing the findings of the IPCC working group report. And we can clearly see that when there is some emerging thing which we need to think about, the out of the box solution, climate adaptation, climate financing, and those things. Now I'll be moving to the next, the keynote speaker, Dr. David Potter. He's a senior climate change and environmental advisor for the governance group at the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, Islamabad. And David has a rich experience on the climate change, water, and food security nexus. And he has previously worked in the climate sector, both adaptation and mitigation in Africa and as well as Asia. So, David, over to you.
Thanks very much, Mohsin. I think you guys have my slides, and you're going to put them up on the screen and run through them as I speak.
Yeah, sure.
Great.
Please put David's slides. David, your slides are showing on the screen. Go ahead, please.
Okay, good stuff. I can only see myself on my screen, so I will use my set of slides on my laptop. Great. Okay, thanks very much. Well, thanks very much for the welcome, Mohsin, and thanks for the opportunity to talk today. As you said, I work for the UK Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office here in Pakistan. We have a strong focus on climate change in our work, and particularly on water and other environmental resource management. What I wanted to talk to you about today was one program that we are currently launching called WRAP, which is the Water Resource Accountability in Pakistan program. If you can move to the context slide, just quickly, context for this. You will know most of this already, and it's already been discussed earlier today, but Pakistan is obviously extremely sensitive to climate risk. It's currently ranked 8th on the Global Climate Risk Index, and it's regularly been in the top 10 over the past years. It also has a great challenge in terms of water governance. It has a relatively low water productivity rate. There are challenges around water resource planning and around the data that's available for mapping water flows. And also extraction methods for the withdrawal of water are environmentally unsustainable. And this group of challenges together is exacerbated by the impacts of climate change. In Pakistan, there's a very admirable history of building of great infrastructure, for example, dams and other water management technologies, which are, of course, very effective, but they also come with challenges, and they're restricted in some ways. For example, building dams is a very expensive and costly response to water management, and also focus very much on the supply side of things rather than focusing on the demand side as well. And we've seen from Dr. Mukherjee's slides that actually there are challenges on both sides in terms of water management, and particularly with the impacts of climate change. As she highlighted, the impacts of glacial melt being a key challenge. And also mentioned by Dr. Mukherjee at the end of her slides, there's a challenge in that the impacts of climate change are not even across all groups of society, and often it's poorer people who have livelihoods more dependent on natural resources who are more greatly impacted by the effects of a changing climate. So next slide, please. Oh, you've gone forward too. There you go. So Just to introduce the program that we've been working on in FCDO, this program is designed to respond to some of those challenges. The overall aim of the work is to strengthen the governance of water at national and provincial levels, supporting adaptation to climate change and improving environmental sustainability. So there are three main areas where we want this program to provide support. The first area is water governance, and IWMI is delivering this section of the program for us. It's in the inception phase now. But this is a recognition that water governance is a key challenge, particularly when you think about the increasing impacts that climate change are creating on our water systems. And we want, with this piece of work, to support Pakistan in sharing water between provinces and to support in the use of the latest research and best practices from the region. And also to provide expertise to the provincial water commissions and to support them to share water between different competing users and groups in society. And we also want to try and support the development of better water management at the district level and to provide the opportunity to scale these up to other districts. So that's the first chunk of work. A second chunk focuses on the next slide around nature-based solutions. And we're yet to confirm a delivery partner for this piece of work. But what we want to do with this work is to demonstrate how there are alternative methods for water management that are non-infrastructure based, or should I say non-grey infrastructure based, and to try and support communities to adapt at the local level to the way that they shape and use their landscapes, and through that to impact on the way that water is managed at the demand end. So, for example, rehabilitating wetland areas, providing landscape features that can capture water within the landscape, these kinds of measures. And we're hoping to build up more of an evidence base of how these methods could be used, and also the areas in which they might outcompete other methods of water management. So those two areas, although on the face of it are fairly distinct, we think there are a lot of links and interconnections between them, and we'd expect that actually, as this work goes along, there'll be a lot of interdependency between those two themes. And we're hoping that together they can generate a larger body of evidence that we can use then to help support the integration of these broader range of measures into water management practices in the country. We've got a third part of the investment and support also, which will be a catalytic fund that we're hoping to start and launch later in 2022. The idea being that we want to provide a funding source for more innovative solutions that perhaps haven't been tried ever before in Pakistan or are entirely new, and to provide a method for funding those and bringing those forwards in the country to allow technical assistance to go ahead to ideally develop a pipeline of interventions on the water in the water space that haven't been tested previously. Okay, so just very quickly on the next slide, our guiding principles for intervention are to try and support governance of water, to try and build resilience and adaptive capacities, and to treat water as a resource, and also to see water management situated in healthy water ecosystems. Also to provide the ability to scale up finance for water response methods and to support innovations in the sector as well. And we're hoping to target increased resilience to climate change and to improve the efficient and productive use of water. So the next slide is gives you an idea of where we're expecting these interventions to be delivered. The first component on water governance is most likely to be focused in the Punjab, while the nature-based measures are going to be further north in the country in KPK and Gilgit-Baltistan. There are going to be some measures that are national as well. So just to quickly dwell on water governance in a bit more detail before I finish talking, which is on the next slide, we want to try and encourage the building of a policy and economic environment that can improve water usage. And we want to do that by, for example, supporting the use of data as a service, so that, building reliable water data that come from a third party, and that could help support decision making about water use. And as part of that, to help provinces to share water between different priority sector areas. So I think this is about providing the tools for governance and for decision makers to manage water flow within the country. And then, as I mentioned before, to try and disseminate these findings out, advocating for the scaling up of these measures across the country, to hopefully provide more tools for policymakers to manage water with. Okay, thanks very much for your time. Thanks for the opportunity for setting out our investment, and I hope this gives some more food for thought in the discussion that's to come. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. David, for providing the insight on the water sources accountability in Pakistan initiative and how that's linked with the other climate adaptation measures. Now I will move to the panelists discussion, and I will first introduce my first panelist is Aisha Khan. He is the Executive Director of Civil Society Coalition for Climate Change and Chief Executive Officer for Mountains and Glacier Organization. She is a founding member of both organizations and regularly contribute articles to the newspaper and magazine on issues related to the environment, climate change, and she is also part of the Pakistan Glacier Monitoring Network and also the Pakistan Center for Philanthropy, and she is also, working as a board of directors on the Energy Conservation Fund. Welcome, Asha. I want to introduce the second panelist member is Dr. Majid Sab, has more than 30 years of the experience in the, again, on the water conservation, and especially when we are talking about the dry land agriculture or the rain-fed agriculture, what are the conservation, and he has done a great work on introducing the climate smart agriculture technologies for the water conservation, and he is also the country representative of the CARDA, which is one of the CGIAR center. Welcome, Dr. Majid Sab. With me next is sitting Dr. Riyaz Sab, who is the chairman of Pakistan Meteorological Department. They have a very active network of all the monitoring weather stations and also all the glacier melting, and they have an active network. And their institute is providing all the expert knowledge and everything, and which we are using for decision making. And thank you very much for sir here. You have a wealth of knowledge, and we will be learning from you today. Now I will be moving to the other is Professor Saeed Khair, who is the professor at the Butam University. He is a professor in economics. He has done a lot of work on especially on the water conservation in the Indus Basin, but also in the non-part of Indus Basin in Balochistan. As President of Pakistan was mentioning in the speech, that the Balochistan is one of the area which is with arid climate and harsh conditions. It becomes very hard to monitor for to go for the water conservation and everything. And there we need to introduce the out of the box solution. So Khair Sab, welcome. I will be next is Ms. Tara Gill. She is the reporter from IFPRI, working as a research associate. And with me, we have one international panelist, Professor Wen Wang, has more than 25 years of experience in hydrological modeling. And he is the professor at Huai University in China. And with Professor Wen Wang, I have been working for the last 15 years, and he is really considered as an authority in hydrological modeling and how that is linking with the different water availability, especially within the future climate scenarios. Wen Wang, welcome here. Okay, so now moving to the questions. First, I will ask, our panelist, the Professor Wen Wang. Professor Wen Wang, could you please provide a bit more information on that one, how from the hydrological modeling, how we could get a better understanding about the climate change impact, and how we could link up with the future scenario based on your extensive rich experience in China?
Actually, in China, I think the similar situation in Pakistan. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
I think in China, the similar case like in Pakistan, we have a very huge population, and actually in the past at least 40 years, the economy in China is developing very fast, and also the population is growing quickly. So we are facing more and more not only the impacts of climate change, but also the impacts of human activity on the hydrological processes. So when we are talking about the hydrological cycle, and in the modeling of hydrological cycle, we should not only consider the natural processes, but also consider the human activities. Of course, in the past, at least like in China, last half a century, the temperature increasing is very significant, as well as the similar case like in the world. And during the process, we have faced the problem of the increasing heavy precipitation, especially, for example, this year we have a very heavy precipitation event in central China, a major city in central China, Zhengzhou, and over 100 people died during the heavy precipitation event. We are not prepared for such kind of heavy precipitation in that area in the past. And also, like this year in autumn, in northern part of China, that's mostly the semi-drought, semi-arid, semi-humid area. We really have very heavy precipitation in the past in autumn in that area. But this year, we have over 100-year flood this year in many parts in northern China as well. So, you know, the climate change as well as human impacts both influence our hydrological processes very significantly. And for hydrological modeling, we should actually not only consider the impacts of hydrological climate change impacts, but also the impacts of human activities. So that's something in hydrological community we call social hydrology, the very hot research area in hydrological community. So in the future, I think we should combine the effects both for modeling hydrological processes better. Yeah, that's my major opinion. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Professor
Yes.
Wenmong. Okay. Now moving to my next moving here in Pakistan, that to Ms. Aisha Khan. How do the local people perceive climate change in the Indus Basin? And what are their coping and then the adaptation mechanism? And especially people understanding on the physical changes with the socioeconomic and demographic changes, what's happening in the Indus Basin. Aisha, over to you.
Thank you very much for having me. I would first like to start out by saying that, you know, we've had several conversations on the Indus Basin as well as the HKH and the 10 river basins and the need for a shared basin management approach. And science has always been very clear about what needs to be done. There have been rounds and rounds of conversations organized by the World Bank, organized by other actors and donors who have discussed this issue at length. The issue really is between science and policy. The poor communities don't even factor in because the language that is used by both is so technical and so complicated that communities don't understand. You know, if you go to any of the mountain communities or you know, the plain areas and you see the hydrological imbalances that are affecting their lives, yes, they're getting affected because they're not getting the water at the right time, in the right quantity, and of the right quality, and their crop cultivations get affected. So that is the #1 priority. For someone like me who also works on ground with grassroots communities, countries, I have noticed the change in their priorities. 20 years ago, if you go to communities and you say, what is need-based, demand-driven need of the community? They would say education, they would say health, and physical infrastructure was the last. Today, if you go to them, irrigation, clean drinking water supply, health, and education has taken the last priority. So they don't have any understanding of what's going on in the Indus River Basin. But those who know what is going on, civil society organizations who work with them, it is their responsibility to educate and in very simple words let them know what global warming means, what their responsibility is, which is practically minimal, because degradation as we attribute to them is not degradation, it is their need. It is their need to have energy and to have fuel for firewood, and if the state does not provide them with any alternatives, viable alternatives, they will continue to use those resources for their survival. Interestingly enough, if you give me a few minutes, I will just share with you. A few months ago, we had another one of those roundtable discussions in which there were representatives from India, from Bangladesh, from Bhutan, from Nepal, and we discussed the river basin. So the science was very clear that we need shared basin management approach. But unfortunately, in South Asia, we have dysfunctional relations between states, which prevents them from reaching the agreement that is necessary to protect humanity. Now, when we talk about the river basin, we have to talk about the Himalaya, Karakoram, and Hindu Kush mountain ranges. And these are very vibrant mountain systems, but they're also very complex and they're very fragile to climate changes. If you go by scientific reports, they'll make different probabilistic analysis to tell you what the warming trends and what the impact of that will be on the snow and glacial melt. So the Indus River is the most vulnerable because it draws 41% of its water intake from snow and glacial melt, as opposed to the Ganges and the Brahmaputra. So I will just quickly give you some of the key takeaways, I think, which will answer your question on what needs to be done, because it needs to be done at the level of science and policy, and the community is the beneficiary population. So the text of the Indus water is silent over the significant reduction in flows from western rivers during prolonged periods of drought caused by climate change. The next thing the committee, the roundtable rather, in which we had this discussion, says that the IWT does not provide for sharing data and information between upper and lower riparian states. The third is that out of the 6 of the 8 countries sharing river waters, there's no comprehensive regional arrangement in place. And at the bilateral level, water sharing agreements, including the IWT, only address minimum concerns of signatories. They do not foster cooperation for the optimum development of assets for the shared benefits of the people. Pakistan, Afghanistan, and India and Bhutan have not yet signed any treaties. So I can go on and give you a whole list of things that needs to be done. Essentially, my short answer is that this mountain system and the river basins cater to about 240 million people directly and about 150 billion people indirectly. So when we talk about addressing water issues, we cannot isolate countries, we have to look at the region as a whole. And without working in collaboration with each other, because whether we like it or not, we cannot change our geography. Every country in South Asia is either an upper or lower riparian state. And we have to work with each other, we have to decouple politics from climate change, from water-related, water scarcity, water security issue, because that will be the one thing that will pit nations against each other, that will pit communities against each other. So we have to take these into account, and when we address issues that affect communities, we have to address science and we have to address society. So I strongly urge that IMI uses its platform for having structured dialogues that bring science, society, and policy together, not once, but repeatedly, and get them to exchange ideas, share information, and raise that critical mass, because the buy-in that science needs from society will not happen if you do not put them together. And the collective pressure from both will perhaps have the right impact on policy to take this forward issue in ways that addresses the humanitarian concerns of all the people who live in this region. Thank you.
Thank you, Aisha Khan, for really giving the insight about that. I mean, for me, there are really two things. One is about we need to think about the integrated approach, link all the regions. So we don't go for silo approach only for Pakistan. So we need to think about the riparian upper part and then the lower part of the system. And second thing is whatever the science is, how the science could be translated towards the policy making, and the end beneficiaries will be the community. So that's where we need to work together. And again, that no institute alone could resolve the problem. That's why we are developing the knowledge platform. That's why we are working with the coalition of partners who are working there with a similar vision how we could work together. Thank you. Now we'll moving to my next panelist is Dr. Majid Saab. Majid Saab, you have extensively worked on that the water management decision at the farm scale level. How is the climate change affecting the key water management decisions for the irrigated agriculture in the Indus Basin and the Pothohar region, which is not part of the Indus Basin or the further down in the one? What is being done for enhancing the climate resilience of irrigation, water management, and irrigation?
Found in extreme cases, particularly in rain-fed areas, is really the families are taking their kids off of school because of lack of food in many situations because of climate change. Where there is a less food available, low rainfall, very abrupt rainfalls, and really temperatures are high, and why they are spending more money on other things like health issues are being also affected by climate change. And in Pothohar, quite a few families have sold their farms even, because they are not anymore sustainable. In Pakistan, which I found out working with the communities, is our 70% farmers are small farmers. And they are the ones who are really most affected by this climate change. Of course, indirectly for their food security, and also, because of water. Because when temperatures are high, rainfall is very abrupt, it's changing, the reliable water management is not there, and then they start suffering. Their crop yields are affected in some years. And we have seen many examples for the last 4 or 5 years. Because of climate changes, their yields are getting low, that they need more water in many situations, because the abrupt change in rainfall, and all these factors are affecting. And ironically, with small farmers, like big farmers, they don't have the resources really to buy technologies, to buy required machinery, to cultivate their own lands, whatever lands they are available there. So the technology, they are lagging behind, and they are depending on we call them, new terminology, agriculture service providers. So we have done quite a bit of work for the last 5, 6 years. How those small farmers can be really can take away this negative impact of climate change and improve their income by using the modern technologies, particularly for water and also for land, their fertility, to really increase or stabilize their production in the system. So what we have found, if you train those people, and SACON was with us, and all the provincial and federal institutions were working with us at farm level, and we trained about 70, 80 agriculture service providers who were living in the villages, who were from those areas. We taught them technologies, new machinery, and also the business, because most of the people who are providing services, they don't know the business, how to do the business in a way that they can earn income as well as they can provide services, in the long run, farmer can get better yield and better income. So our experiences has been very positive to tackle impact of negative impact of climate change, and also bad management in water use, and getting low yields because of many things were not available to them. So I think I will leave a note that for small farmers who are more vulnerable in the country, less in the irrigated areas, but lot more in the dry lands and marginal areas, we need to develop a different system, different approach to really bring new technologies to them. Our system of bringing technologies, treating big farmer and small farmer with the same level is not going to work in Pakistan. So this is my take-home message to you. Let's start thinking different technology. Same technology might work, but same machinery may not work because they have small land holding, small farms. You need a different kind of approach which is helping. I tell you, those service providers, particularly on water, we were saying in Balochistan, nobody will use the new technologies like drip system and other systems. I tell you frankly, without any subsidy, with trained manpower, those service providers, with nut and bolts, they are earning 3 million, 4 million and providing services to those people. And many orchards are now coming with new technologies of drip system, bubbler systems. Similarly in Pothoar, only application of gypsum and biozote, which is improving this gypsum used to be told in the past. I'm going a bit in detail, Dr. Saab, I'm not taking too much of your time, but I'd like to share that these new technologies can really work a lot for those people, provided you have a mechanism to take those technologies, those small farmers. And only awareness will do half the job, because our extension, all other departments, we are trying to create awareness. But where is the actual technology? Who is going to deliver that technology to those small farmers? So that's the key. If you don't do that, you're not going to improve production. You're not going to have improve the impact of climate change in thousands and thousands of villages and communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Saab, for really sharing that the technology need to be adopted based on the geographic realities, based on the farmer's size, farmer's field, soil conditions and everything. So we cannot have a uniform solution, and we need to be adopted to improve the livelihood of the people. Now moving to my next panelist is Professor Saeed Khair. For Balochistan, we have witnessed that there is government has introduced a subsidy, and then the electric tubewells were extracting your water 24 hours, whatever the time the electricity was available, and then the water level has dropped down. The water level has dropped to the 1,000 foot. And many of the ridges which were built, the natural system that has been destroyed. So what's happening in Balochistan? Could you please provide that one? How is it due to the human, the intervention that they started pumping extra? How much is the contribution from a climate change for that one?
For providing me the opportunity to share the current situation in Balochistan. As President of Pakistan mentioned that he especially quoted Balochistan that things are worse there in terms of water scarcity and water table. People are extracting water from the depth of more than 1,000 meters, 1,000 feet. So in many areas, the tubewells have dried, and for example in Lorlai district and Pashin district, and it has caused the migration of the communities from those areas. So we can foresee, in the future, in the remaining areas of the Balochistan, that given the current policies of the government is given electricity subsidy to tubewell owners, electric tubewell owners, by 90% subsidy on electric bills, and this policy, is causing a lot of problems in terms of water misuse, because the farmers, they are getting subsidized electricity, and they just run their tubewells without looking into the future of the water resources. So yes, I would say that man-made factors have caused more problems in Balochistan than the climate change. In the man-made factors, I would say I would rank first the government policy of subsidy that is worked adversely in terms of water resource sustainability, although it has given employment and livelihood opportunities to the people. But I think now it is the time to shift that policy and move toward a sustainable thinking. We have also experienced that solar irrigation tubewells are getting popularity in Balochistan, and a lot of installment is going on over there. So in those areas where there is no electricity, people are using solar irrigation systems to extract water. So currently, I mean, out of 18 groundwater basins, 3 or 4 basins are water scarce. But in the future, with the introduction of these solars, we can see in the next coming, I mean, 4 to 5 years, I mean, more than 12 basins would be water scarce. So yes, what can we do now? We can, I mean, educate farmers, as one of the panelists says, that it is very important to change the behavior of the farmer, thinking of the farmers. Most of the farmers think that water is an infinite resource. So we need to change this thinking. And with the help of an CGIAR project, recently we have done some interventions in the field. We provided the farmers with high efficiency irrigation systems, low delta crops, and guidance. So we have seen very good adaptation in terms of, I mean, after these interventions, I have received calls from many farmers. They are asking for high efficiency irrigation systems with low delta fruits and crops. So I think the interventions are required in the area of, I mean, these such type of interventions are required. The farmers are, I mean, they are ready to accept this change provided they are given the complete package of technology. So guidance plus irrigation system plus low delta plants or crops. So the farmers are then ready. We have seen very good acceptance rate, I mean, just 5 to 6 months ago. So yes, this was all about from my side. So
Considering that the time, we have a 15 minutes for anyone from the audience to ask a question, brief question from any of the presenter, the keynote speaker, or from the panelists. Floor is open. And when someone wants to raise it, please mention introduce yourself, and then from which institute, and then please ask the question, and then also mention whom you are asking the question. Okay, Kamran, Dr. Kamran, go ahead. Kamran, maybe you come here and ask the question so that the international participant will hear. Do we have any mic?
Thank you, Dr. Mohsin. It's a very fruitful discussion here. The panelist has raised very core issues as when we talk about the climate change and its impact on the water availability. When we talk about the Indus Basin, as Aditi Mukherjee already mentioned, that climate change will not come. It has already come. So we have to do accordingly. My question is there, when we talk about the Indus Basin, is to start from Himalaya to the delta. Sometimes it feels that, you know, the delta part has been ignoring. As Dr. Majid already mentioned, the small farmer is more vulnerable. So in delta part, you know, the sea intrusion occurs. I have just read somewhere while coming here that last year only 1 million acre feet of water was delivered to the downstream. So again, the monsoon has been disturbed. So this is basically a integrated approach, interprovincial, and all things together to do some sustainable solution. Because the Indus Delta farmers has no choice. They have to live, they have to adopt with salinity. And they have only that kind of water. So how we have to protect this water as a nation? Thank you.
Anyone want to respond? Any panelists?
2040, and after that there'll be scarcity. So there will be shortage of water that comes to the delta. So at least under the worst case scenario, there's a 70% reduction in the volume of snow and glacial melt. And in the best case scenario, there is still a 30% reduction. So whichever way we look at it, you are going to get 30% less. The population of Pakistan at its present rate will be around 380 million by 2040. So the portion of water that you get, even if it stays stable, will be neutralized. So the delta is already suffering, and the delta is going to suffer more. So I think that is why the water policy that has come out provides a plan for a master plan for every province. That has yet to be developed. No province has worked on the master plan from the water management, from the water policy of 2018. So the first thing that provinces need to do is to also put aside their differences and forget about the political economy of water and start looking at environmental flows. And whatever we say about just transition, just, climate justice, the one humanity, shared responsibility, we need to start applying those principles on ourselves within Pakistan.
Thank you, Aisha. Any other panel members want to comment?
Integration within provinces or across the boundaries. But I notice I work from northern areas to Delta, Dartsamro, that use of water, wastage of water is the same. Flooding is going on everywhere. People don't care about really how much water they're using. They only intest, sometimes even their crop yields are suffering because of they're putting more water. So there has to be a realization, whatever water is available, they are also not utilizing it properly. So among those, the small farmers are the most really vulnerable in this situation because of climate change. Thank you.
Hello.
Yes, Professor Mahmood, and then, yes, sir. First, Professor Mahmood.
I would like to have the reaction of the panelists and the speakers because. Okay, can you hear me? Just based on our recent work which is going on for two projects I'm working on, and I will say that I will drown in nature-based, that's what the word keep coming back, whether it is water or agriculture. So I think our preliminary finding was that we have listed technologies and practices which we perceive that they are climate smart. My first reaction was that most of the departments and the other people we visited institutions, they are just repacking the old technologies and practices and trying to tell us that these are climate smart. Again, it's a question, some of them are. Just to cut short the thing is, first I would like to say that our policies still continue to be supply side. There is so much can be done on the demand side to address the issues of water scarcity and climate change. For example, two areas I will highlight. We have a long list of technologies which we can classify. One I feel out that singles out it that we need not the big storage at the farm level and the community level. I think this will really give us from different angles. This is something probably one can talk for hours on it really. The second thing which I feel is, Gail Saab is here really, and I think we find out that laser leveling, I think it is really adding value to this is something that will go very well in terms of addressing the climate. Now coming to the practices, this is another area which nobody talks about it. I think it's, at the end of the day, it's the practices. Now, I'll go also we have a whole list of things and we are debating on it, which one to put it as climate and not really. Two which are very, very important. One is how we convert from this flooding irrigation to some other system which really. So we have working with an outfit in Punjab which is saying if we can just have cultivation on raised bed, three things to be done. So these are practices. Raised bed cultivation, on it mulching, and the third thing is intercropping. What it can do, it can need only 1/4 of the water. But I was in Balochistan last week, and they were saying, oh, that's too much. Even if we can get 10 to 15%, that, or also in Sindh, that will be good enough for us to really, bring more area. This is something probably needs to be done, really. The second thing which I was talking about is intercropping. So I think this is another area where we can now, we go against sugarcane. Yes, I'm also one of the proponents that we have to get out of. But then the outfit I'm working on, it says that if you can do some good practices with sugarcane, you can also make it profitable. So I think I'm very keen to see that because nature-based, these are all nature-based converting it. So some of these technology probably, so there is a silent revolution in the making, but we don't talk about it too much.
Thank you, sir. Really, that the point which you have raised about that, the conservation, about the nature base, about the farm scale, those are the right thing, very close to my heart. And I think we need to think about the out of the box solution, and that's where that the farm level things to change our rigid supply driven system to make it demand driven system. I'll be requesting Dr. Yasser Niaz and then Mushtaq Gill sir.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank to Dr. Mohsen, my senior, my colleague, और वैसे भी Mohsen उर्दू में कह लें इनको. Thanks for inviting me on international conference on need for sustainable water management in climate crisis for the Indus Basin. My question specifically, basically I'm an assistant professor in Khwaja Farid IT University and the pioneer of a Department of Agriculture Engineering, Rahim Yar Khan. So I travel for a lot for this conference as well. My specifically question for Professor Khair Mohammad, because after PhD I have been work in biomes for more than 1 year in a biomes, and I see the crisis in Balochistan about the water scarcity. The scientists predict that there is no future of a Quetta city after 2025. There is no life exist in a Quetta city if we didn't work on a water scarcity. So I think there is a lot of government agencies and non-governmental agencies working on a water scarcity. What are the future plans for to protect and scarcity of these water scarcity? I think you got my point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To supply water to Quetta city, the government is constructing 2 dams, large dams in the suburbs of Quetta city. One is Mangi Dam that is being built on the north of Quetta city. So it is a big project. So after the construction of this project, I mean the situation would be eased much. There would be much good amount of water would be available. Besides this, the government is also considering the construction of Burj Aziz Khan Dam. There are some political problems with their dam, but the government is also thinking to construct Burj Aziz Khan Dam on Pashin river, Pashin Loda. And besides this, the government was also considering to bring water from the Nasirabad, from the Indus system, to supply water to Quetta city. Its distance is around 300 kilometers. So the government was also considering the feasibility of this project to supply water from the Indus river system to Quetta city. But that was very costly, and due to technical reasons, this project is not work is not going on this project. So yes, government is thinking to bring water from, there are many other projects. Our colleague from irrigation department is here, he can tell you. So the federal government is also working through 100 dams project. Some very good dams have been constructed. Their dams have helped to reinstate the Kari's irrigation system and tubewells, and has helped recharge the groundwater. So dams are, I mean, now the very good multi-purpose dams are being constructed that are very, very useful. So yes, government is conscious about this, as the Honorable President Saab said that I discussed with the provincial government, and the political leadership was in consensus to build dams for the future of Quetta city and Balochistan.
Thank you.
Just can I add?
Yeah, sure.
Just about, you're giving examples of Quetta. I traveled to Jordan, I traveled to Lebanon, I traveled to those countries where rainfall is almost similar as in Syria as we have in Quetta. So I think we have, those people have converted their houses as storage tanks. When the rainfall comes, they store their water, they wash their cars, they wash their houses, they wash their clothes, they even wash themselves with that water. Only drinking water is required. If we start thinking that direction, as President also indicated this morning, I think we have to think that way in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Agil sir. And then Engineer Nadeem.
Thank you very much about giving a total update of the climate change effects on the Indus Basin and in the region. My concern and a question to Aditi Mukherjee and then David
Walter
was just David
Yep.
Potter, you know, and to the panelists, particularly to Madam Aisha Khan, is addressing a gray area in the Indus Basin, which is the desert or semi-desert or cultivable wastelands of not irrigated by the canal system. And that is, I think, if we take, due to climate change, the communities over there, they have been adversely affected about the temperature rise and their, practices, particularly livestock and other factors. So my suggestion would be that, and if under the RAP program, this area is also addressed, and we can see that in the region even how China and some other countries, they have developed there, even in Egypt and other examples are there, how they have been, converting their deserts to blooms and, using the rainwater or even the other sources which can, develop these. Because at this stage in Pakistan, hardly 1/3 of the area is cultivated. Rest is all, particularly in Balochistan and Thar and Cholistan areas, where major chunk of land could be brought under the cultivation. So this area needs a special mention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Agil. So I will go through our 3 international panelists, the keynote speaker, and then the 4th is Stefan Oldenbrook, who is the thematic area 1 for this one. I will first ask Aditi, from your Indian experience, would you be able to share some lights on Mr. Agil's question?
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting and a thought-provoking question. I think what many places in India now are doing in those kind of extremely arid, semi-arid regions where any agriculture without irrigation is becoming harder is they're actually coming up with a lot of grid-connected solar systems. In some ways, that also, if those grid-connected solars are owned by individual farmers, then that gives a source of income, but it also helps in the clean energy transition. So perhaps some kind of thinking out of the box, because livelihood generation for farmers always does not necessarily need to be by growing crops alone. So I don't know if that makes sense in your particular context, but there are places in India where in very arid, semi-arid, they are trying these kind of solar panels, and farmers are earning income from those panels by selling electricity to the grid.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aditi. David, from your experience in in Africa or from other part of Asia, could you please provide insight, if any?
Thanks, Mohsen. Yes, and thanks very much for the question. I think on the RAP program specifically, we haven't 100% pinned down the geographical scope of the interventions yet. So we will be thinking about all of the areas of the country and which most need support and where we could have the most impact. I think above that, though, what we really want to do is to build two things: the evidence base of for a wider range of interventions. So bringing in, for example, Dr. Mukherjee's experience from India and experience from other countries, and demonstrating how that could be applied in Pakistan to useful effect. And I think also there's an element here of trying to influence farmers themselves to understand what the options they might have for water management, particularly on the demand side. So that is demonstrating how farmers might be able to address some of the challenges they will face when water supplies reduce further. And so we want to try and use our RAP program to do some of that. So I hope that's in some way a helpful answer to your question. Thanks.
Thanks, David. Professor Wen Wang, any experience from China? Because China had converted a lot from the desert condition towards the, especially for cotton production.
Yes, I think in China we have a huge, vast area of arid climate, and in those places, in the past, we also developed. We have promote the agriculture, agriculture land use in many arid areas with the fast development of irrigation areas, but that's not very sustainable. So in the last several years, we can see in many arid area we are controlling the expansion of irrigation area, even reduce in some place dry area to reduce the irrigation area. So we must balance the water use for different sectors and balance the water use for upstream areas and the downstream areas. That's something we should consider, especially for to take the whole basin, like Indus River Basin, as a whole, to consider the development in different areas. We cannot just to improve our agriculture, water land, the irrigation water use, but you see, anyway, what I want to say is we should balance the water use to make it more efficient for every sectors and every regions in the river basin.
Thank you. Professor Stefan, any comments from your global experience?
Thank you, Professor Mohsin. I really enjoyed the discussion, and I didn't expect to speak here, but I think what I learned today in this presentation is clearly the importance of climate change, global warming, particularly, and the change on the snow and ice melt, which is so important for Pakistan. I think that was said a few times by Aditi as well as David Potter. But how that translates, the change of the hydrological regimes, how does that translate to for the cropping patterns? What does that mean for water availability during the pre-monsoon, main monsoon, and summer season? And the different composition of the different hydrological components, how we can adapt to that in agriculture as well as in other sectors, is still something which will needs further discussion. And probably it comes up in the next 1.5 days in the conference, as well as just in the next session. There's some environmental flows, which I'm looking forward to, that whole basin discussion, including down to the delta. So many good, I learned a lot in the session, many good points were made, but also outlined a lot of the key sectors and activities where we need to focus on. That's my impression so far. Thanks. Over.
Thank you, Steph. Just last question from the Dr. Nadeem, who is the Director General of Balochistan Agriculture Science Center. Nadeem.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Mohsin Saab. First of all, thanks to IWMI and PCRWR for enabling us and inviting us to participate in this prestigious event. My name is Nadeem Sadiq, and I am working as Director General in PRC in Quetta, and the department name is Balochistan Agriculture Research and Development Center. we are actually working on rain-fed, mostly we are working on rain-fed farming. So prior to this, the name of our department was arid zone. It was a site-specific name, but recently we have been changed. So my question relates to rain-fed farming, especially from Dr. Majid Saab, who has worked a lot in this field, Ms. Aisha Khan, and the online speakers also. So what I think and I believe is that we have only 2 to 3 districts in Balochistan, which is only dependent on the canal water, Nasirabad districts and Division and Jafarabad districts. The rest of whole of the Balochistan, which is about 44% of the area of Pakistan, it only depends on the rain-fed farming, rain-fed water and the tube well. So what we can believe, as the President of Pakistan has already spoken a lot about Balochistan for the future of Pakistan, what we believe is that if proper management and implementation is given to Balochistan, it can feed the whole of the Pakistan in the coming years, because we have lots of lands and barren lands. So what I think, and already it has been proposed in here also, that special emphasis has to be given in capturing the rainwater. As Dr. Khair also earlier explained that some 100 dams are also being constructed in this President's program. But what I think that special emphasis has to be given on this collection of the rain-fed water, because almost about more than the volume of Tarbela Dam, we lost every year without capturing it. So what I think is that we have to go on Salaba farming, that's spate irrigation farming throughout the Balochistan areas. We have vast, huge bunds which are dried and we cannot conserve water. So what will happen that if we are able to conserve this rainwater for this Salaba irrigation and spate irrigation systems, we can harvest the water, we can grow up more crops, we can grow up more food, and the underground water table, which is going down at an alarming position, that's about 10 to 12 feet per year, we are facing it in the downward direction, we can stop it. And the other thing, what I think is that as Dr. Khair has said, that the subsidy being given to the Balochistan farmers, that's also harming us a lot in the water crisis. So we are also working on drip irrigation system. We are providing about 500 acres we have given, but the farmers are not willing, accepting that thing, because when they are getting free water, there is no, what you can say, that no stoppage for them to use water. So it's very difficult for us, for the government officials, to divert them on drip irrigation system and water conservation techniques. Thank you.
Thank you. I think considering looking at the time, already we are over the schedule. I will be just now requesting Dr. Riaz Saab just to provide a closing remarks. Dr. Riaz Saab.
Thank you, Dr. Mohsen, and respected guests and presenters. What I have learned from morning till to now, specifically the presentations that from the online, Aditi and David, and the answers of the question by experts, or Dr. Majid, Madam Aisha Khan and Professor Saab. It's really a very valuable, and definitely I will say that climate, because that's provide a specific atmosphere for either its agriculture sector or its health, whatever it may be. Each area there is a specific climate is required. But when the climate is changing, climate change means that it's changed from that form which already provide a growth or a very friendly atmosphere to the that sector. So the most important, as we know internationally and similarly in Pakistan Biological Department already monitoring this thing, and we have even from earlier before the existence of the Pakistan, there was some meteorological data. And now we have from 61 till to 20, there is a two climate that normal, that international standards, that is 30 years from 1961 to 90 and then 90 till to run. So that is the international standards. According to these standards, we have seen that there is a differences and there is some changes in definitely. Something we have here that there was nothing matching, there was nothing gauged, but the people are saying that okay, the climate is changing, but there's no fact. But here we have observed that temperature that is increasing 0.5 degrees Celsius from last 60 years till to now. We got 0.5 degrees Celsius as that's in that internationally is a 1.5. But here in Pakistan, that 0.5 degree Celsius increased from last 60 years in Pakistan, that is recorded. Similarly, rainfall, that is also variation in it, and that's increased slightly. Earlier, it was sharp, normal. Later on, it's slightly become to normal. But we have seen that it's a slightly more rain, not below normal, but it is slightly normal rainfall we got from last 60 years. So that is all in the record. So in this point of view, but similarly, warming is also increasing. And what we got here from specifically the water, the most affected area, that is the water sector, because the rain basically that provide either the surface water or the groundwater, or in terms of the glacier or snow melting. So after all, what the source is the weather, and that is the rain in whatever the form may be. So in that form, it's badly impacted because the temperature is increasing. So now we have seen, we should have to be kept this in mind. Either they are researcher or they are the users or the water or whatever may either. So we should have to now take the steps for the adaptation, because this is the at one side we have to how we could minimize the gases, the emissions, but other side we must have to think about how we could adopt some adaptations measures to be adopted. But it's very difficult. We have seen from the expert that Professor Saab, he comments on that there is a how we could be use this word, because there is a mindset how we could change this mindset to shift from the flooding irrigation to the other areas where there is a minimum water is required to that. It's not easy thing, but it's a very hard work. See, the government and other organizations, they should have to sensitize the public, the farmers for this purpose. So these are the requirement. Another area is that the adaptation, that is the most important sensitization from the climate change, from the measures that how we could be. So for this, I think thanks and appreciate the efforts of IMI for in this regard, specifically for the water, because water is the most important. It's directly connected with the agriculture, and agriculture play important role. It is in the development of the country and direct impact on the public. So if agriculture, if there is a water scarcity, the people, they are not they are not using their proper water, because we have seen even in normal days when there is a deficient water, likely this year we got less water in our reservoirs. So it's definitely going towards the provinces issues. It's creating some other issues. So that's why we should, the crux and conclusion of my talk is that and from morning till to now, what I have heard this from the experts, specifically climate experts, from water experts, that climate is changing, water scarcity, it would be coming in a future. So now we need how we could meet these challenges, and that is the adaptation. So with this, I think once again, I'm grateful to all you and Amy for specifically arranging this workshop, and thank you for inviting us in this. But I'm still saying it's a fact. It's changing. We could see deficiency, population growth is also, demand is much more and more. Water would be, their scarcity would be observed in a future, maybe not in this century, maybe this, but it may be. What our children, our coming generation, that will face this definitely. So for that purpose, if we do some work to at least change the mindset of the users and do such type of the measurement for the adaptation. So I think it would be most beneficial for the country and for our future generation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Riasa, for sharing the insight and emphasizing on the change of mindset. With this one, I will be concluding this session. First of all, I want to thank you to all our keynote speakers, who are joining it virtually, Dr. Aditi Mukherjee, Dr. David Potter, and Professor Stefan Uhlenbrook, who is the thematic leader area 1, and he is not able to join us, in person, but he is there listening all the basically thematic area 1, and then Professor Wen Wang, and all the panelists here. Thank you, everyone, and with all the participants. Now we'll break for 20 minutes, and then around 4 o'clock in this session, in this room, there will be need for sustainable groundwater management, and where Dr. Lucy Layton will be giving a keynote speech on the groundwater, what World Bank is doing. Thank you. I think that there is now a coffee break, a tea break. Amjad? Where? Okay, all right.
Recording stopped.